live Hobart Trail Runners here with still in kind of lockdown. I mean, the parks are certainly open, but have managed to pin the legendary Hanny Allston down. It's been a long time coming, and thanks so much for joining us, Hanny.
Oh, it's so good to be on here, Lincoln. And I'm like, total take my hat off. Literally, I guess I could. Although my hair is horrendous at the moment. Feel like Justin Bieber, actually. Uh, but no, I really take my hat off for everything you're doing for us in the community now. And it's just so nice to finally see some energy being really driven into it. And I apologize that I wasn't probably the one driving all the energy into Hobart Trail Runners, but to have got it started with Dale so many years ago and now see you really like taking it over is just so awesome. I just hope everyone's getting behind it.
Cool. No,
Yeah.
thanks, mate. Well, I mean, you've certainly got your hands very full with Find Your Feet, retail, tours, peak coaching, as well as still racing and and mad wilderness adventures. So everyone has their I guess time in the different roles, and I certainly won't be doing this forever, but really keen to getting it done. Before we get right into it, I would like to take 2 seconds to acknowledge the country that we're on here tonight in Nipaluna, Hobart, and the traditional custodians of Tasmanian Aboriginal people and their elders, past, present, and emerging. Very important people. I think we've got a lot that we can still need to learn in immersion in their country and our country and their culture. So, how are you, Hanny? How's life?
That's a full question. It's a full question of this era, isn't it? Certainly, like everyone, we've just been on that wild ride, Lincoln. Like I said to you as we were just chatting before this got started, the only word that really exists for me these days is it's a roller coaster. And whilst I wouldn't really wish COVID-19 on anyone and the experience that we're living through at the moment, I'm actually really grateful for it. I'm grateful for it because I feel like it's brought me, and I know I speak for our team as well at Find Your Feet and for Graham, who I obviously run Find Your Feet with, but it's brought us back to our core purpose in life. And I think because of that, I'm finding great wellness. I think I didn't realize like how fast I was trying to live my life until this really hit, and we're all forced to, whilst the business side is so quickly moving and every day is completely different, I didn't realize how fast I was rolling life, and I was driving that admittedly. And so this whole experience has really brought me right back to 10 years ago when I started Find Your Feet, in a time where I was coming out of a period of quite great adversity, and something I write about really openly in the book. And it was a time where I just kind of kept finding myself saying, like, I'm just trying to find my feet. And it was just about 2 months ago, I was out running on the trails one morning in the dark, and I just had this sudden feeling like I'd been here before, and it wasn't in terms of the place or the location I was running, but this huge sense of like, I've been here before. And I was like, what is it? What is it? What is it? And then it was just like, it was that time 10 years ago when I started Find Your Feet. And it was like this calling to me to return to my core values. And that's what we've done. And like I say, within that, then I found this huge sort of feeling of like returning home to myself and slowing down and really appreciating the small, simple things that I have. And then looking at all the routines that I had going on in my life and thinking like, which ones have got me to here but no longer serve me, and which ones serve me that I need to kind of optimize. And so, like I'm good. I think I'm good, which is
awesome.
Is really nice to be able to say. So,
well, that's beautiful. I mean, Find Your Feet is such a I've always really liked the name. I love what you're all about, and I can see the impact that you have on our community and the wider community as well in how you operate yourself and your business, and really looking forward to this book you've got coming out. So how was that?
Oh, yeah, what a wild ride. Yeah, I mean, I think I just want to say before we launch into the book, which is definitely an interesting story in itself, but um, I started Find Your Feet 10 years ago because, like I say, I was in a real point where I'd lost my feet. And I'd really lost my sense of self in all of that. I was on this trajectory of trying to strive for the Olympic marathon. I was on the cusp of qualification, and in that I lost myself and I lost my wellness. And I ended up back in Tassie, and a lot of people just going, wow, you've been on the road for so many years, and what are you doing back here now? And I just kept finding myself saying, like, I'm trying to find my feet. And in that, then, as I was drifting around, kind of wondering where my life was going to lead next, I saw these people training for Point to Pinnacle on the mountain, and making it look fairly tough and fairly miserable and fairly isolated. And I thought, why don't we bring these people together, and I'll teach them running techniques and primary school running games in the parks of Hobart, and maybe together we'll just have some fun, really, was the theme. And I'm so grateful for that time, because what it taught me was that I wasn't the only one facing one of the many human experiences, but in many ways we all were. We all had stories, and it made me realize that if you do it together, you're stronger together. And someone also said to me at the time, they said, "Han, it doesn't matter how beautiful the gift is you're trying to give others if you can't give the gift to yourself. You're only ever going to see the person giving the gift, not the gift." And it was a huge wake-up call to me to kind of pull myself out of that place I was in. And so, yeah, Find Your Feet, it's the core purpose of it all is just being to help people find their feet. And at times I've forgotten that. And they're the times when it's felt like a challenge, and when I've come back to just this absolute desire to help other people. It's always served me as well. So kind of I mention it because it brings the book to life. The book is called Finding My Feet, My Story. It's scary. It's a memoir, clearly. So it's really hard to write a book at the age of 33, because so many of the people, whilst they're not all still alive, so many of them are still alive, or their partners and loved ones are still alive. And writing a book like that, where you share your story, makes you realize like how many of our stories are intertwined. And it's so hard to write a story without bringing in those other people into it. And when you're talking about things that are quite tough and pointed and messy, because that's what life is, it's really hard not to feel terrified that you're going to hurt someone in the process. So this book, I'm really proud of it. Writing a book and me sitting down still enough to write a book is actually kind of quite something.
Yeah, hang on. How did you fit that in? Like,
no, I actually fitted 2 in the space of 3 years. So I did a lot of writing, but it is one of the few things that will hold me still and bring me joy in a room within 4 walls. And it's made me realize, like, in my heart, I am a writer. I love writing. So I'm really proud of that. The book I actually finished writing back October, over a year ago. And then I paused for a bit, terrified to share it with my parents.
yeah.
Because they feature in it quite strongly. And then I paused because I had this sort of sea of feeling, like I wrote it because I wanted to share that human experience and give other people permission to strive and realize that you can thrive through adversity. And if I could help one person, even on the planet, to not fall in one of the holes that I fell in along the way, then I feel like it was worth writing that book. So in that, I kind of felt like it would be really wonderful to get it out to a publisher who could help me, get it out there. And I tried for some time and I had a few bites, but no huge success. And then I decided that I would just push the whole self-publishing pathway again, which brought me great joy the first time around with the guidebook. And then literally the ninth hour, I kid you not, it was like 3 hours before we hit go on selling the first of our 400 copies that we ordered in from the self-publishing print house. I got a tap on the shoulder from a publisher saying that they wanted to publish the book. So we've been backpedaling so fast in the last 1.5 weeks to kind of sell the limited edition pre-orders that we bought, and to now be going down a pathway where the publisher is just a wild ride. So yeah, long story, but kind of cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, it's so awesome that you've recognised that you are a writer, and that's a passion and a gift that you can share with others, and B, to actually give that time, like, with everything else you got going on. So,
well, I'm just indebted to the people around me, to the team at Find Your Feet who stepped up when I stepped back to spend a lot of time writing that book, because I really did become a hermit. We were homeless at the time, and we were house sitting for a friend who had a little wood fire up on the mountain, and I just literally bunkered in and wrote all day, other than going for a couple of runs and getting out for some fresh air. And I'm like indebted to Graham. Obviously, he's the love of my life, but he really did take the reins through that time, and picked up so many of the things that I just put down to kind of write. And like I say, all of our stories are just entwined with others, and it was a process in making me learn to step back so that we could all step up. And so it's kind of like a team effort. Yeah, and I think it also too, you say like it's cool to be able to acknowledge that you're a writer, but I think there's a lesson in this for everyone, is that I think until probably 2 or 3 years ago, I had this vision of Hanny as like a black and white creature, like I'm Hanny and I'm a runner. And I didn't really know who Hanny was if I wasn't a runner, because that's what I'd been painted my whole life, and I'd painted that picture of myself my whole life. It was Hanny the world champion, but it always was Hanny in an athletic pathway. And it wasn't until I've done a lot of work internally on myself that I've come to realize like that we have so many different archetypes within us. Like I'm Hanny the athlete, but I'm also Hanny the writer. And now I'm kind of Hanny the new kind of queen of yoga. Like I'm kind of giving that a whirl and
how
trying
good
to
is yoga?
It feels really cool, actually. Like I'm loving
so
it.
Good.
So,
yeah.
But I'm Hanny a daughter, I'm Hanny a wife, and I have all of these different personas, and all of them are equally right. And it's just nice to finally, I guess, share that side of myself with other people as well.
Yeah. So talk to me about Hanny, the athlete, in terms of performance and racing. I remember when I first moved home, probably 2 years ago now, came to one of your Q&As at the store, and you were kind of emphatic at the time, saying, "I'm done with racing." There might have been a disclaimer, sort of like for now, but at that time, I was definitely done with racing. But you've had been dabbling again, I guess. Flinders Island Marathon last year, and then Tarawera early this year. That, I understand, was an experience. But yeah, tell us about Hanny the athlete at the moment, and how's that? It's not something you're able to shake off, if that's what you were trying to do.
Yeah, completely. It's such a great question, Lincoln, and thanks for raising it and opening this space to talk about it. It's been a really that's probably been the greatest challenge that I've been working on in the last 3 years personally, was my whole sporting career. It was drummed into us from a young age to always make sure that you had something for after sport, right? So it was always kind of this like subtle tone of there will eventually be an end point of athleticism, and then the real world starts and you're ready for the big real world, and in my head I'd kind of pictured it like athlete, reach an end point, adult. And so I think kind of the cusp of that turning point happened when Graham and I got engaged, and like we went down the whole like let's get married pathway in our own style. And I think in my head I really did start to transition, like, oh, maybe this whole, because to be an elite athlete you have to be quite selfish. You really do have to be able to box away the noise and focus in on the job at hand, because it is kind of like a job. And I was nervous about bringing that almost selfishness into this next phase of life. And so I kind of saw it as, oh, maybe this is that end point, and I'm now no longer an athlete, and I stepped away from it. And it was right. It was right. The competitiveness within me was starting to dwindle, and it's really hard to be expected of, because I am in that setting a fairly public figure, to constantly get back on that knife edge and race when your heart's not quite there. Like even a 5% missing of the heart is a huge drop in performance and makes the day really tough, especially when it's a 12-hour ultra marathon. So so I stepped back in 2017 after the Ultra Trail Australia. Really tough race for me. And then I kind of went on this journey of like playing really hard, and I've completely fallen in love with that. It brings me so much joy, right? And so returning last year from my wild run through the French Pyrenees Mountains, spontaneous, I kind of had this feeling of like, oh, maybe I am an athlete again, and I connected with that, and it sat with me. So I wondered where the depths of athleticism were going, and did that include the competitive athlete in me, or was the athlete a wilder creature for now? And so, I began to dabble again, and the dabbling took me to Tarawera on a sort of whim after the Western Arthurs, where I felt like I was in really great shape, and I thought maybe this is it. Maybe this is the time to kind of try this whole competitive athlete thing again, and went back to New Zealand in March, and I got the answer I was looking for.
Yeah.
Like I really was fired up. I was really hungry going into the race, and I really felt like I was ready to give it a red hot crack. But as soon as the gun went, my heart it was kind of like my heart just turned off, and I just didn't have the fire. I really gave it a crack to run with the top girls, and I think I was in good shape. I was probably a bit fatigued from running the Western Arthurs, but the heart just wasn't there. And so I just decided not to fight it. And I kind of like, it was hard pulling out at 65 in a lot of ways, but in a lot of ways I got all of the answers that I needed for now. And I'm not saying it's forever, it's just a for now. I think if you're going to go into a race, you really make sure your heart's there, or anything, if you're going to do anything, make sure your heart's there.
Yeah.
That's
so interesting, being like so fired up for it, but then realizing that the heart wasn't in it. Because psych is, if the psych's not there, then it's not happening. But hang on, you can break that psych down into the heart and the fire, I guess, is just done there for you.
And Lincoln, I've been doing the work. So 18 months ago, I started working with an American lady who then came out to Australia and worked with top Olympic athletes and singers and artists and actors and actresses. She's worked with she's incredible. She's the head coach for Lululemon as well. And she came on a running tour as a non-running mom, right? So she's not a runner, but she's the most extraordinary woman. Her craft is neuro-linguistic programming. So it's like learning the language in which we speak to ourselves and how to reframe it. And she uses a lot of like hypnosis and all sorts of things. And I just kind of had this gut feeling that I needed to work with her, and I didn't really know where that journey was going to take me. But it's been the most crazy experience of really coming to really understand myself and I guess bring the conversation to light within me. And I have not only just done the work with her, but I've learned her craft as well, and I've brought that now to my coaching. And so going back to New Zealand was kind of this opportunity to pull all of these techniques out that I'd been using in my wild adventures, but I hadn't done them with the noise around you, the noise, the pressure, that side that goes with a competitive racing environment. And I thought, cool, like, let's have a go. But when the heart's not there, it doesn't matter how many tools you have. You just don't have the fire. It's just it was such an eye-opening experience, because compared like 3 weeks earlier to like spontaneously having a crack around, or a play in the Western Arthurs and environment, which scares the socks off me, to be honest. But the tools were just there, and they were so powerful and so strong, and so I felt so capable in them. But I had the fire, I had the heart. So
Yeah.
I kind of think now the heart is probably number one element. You've got to love what you do. And I probably always have advocated that. Be wild, play wild, and then perform wild. I think in New Zealand I just was having trouble with the play factor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and also, wild adventures, it's very committing. The only way out is to get out yourself. I mean, otherwise you're popping the EPIRB, and that's not the way you want to get out. But just sticking on the racing just for a little bit longer, the like expectation of yourself, or what or if you let yourself have expectation, what you think others want to see in you is huge. And actually, so for me in my running, I'm still on the progression of, hey, there's heaps more bigger races, and my performance is improving. I'm, quite recent to trail running as a sport. Whereas in a previous life, I was actually, someone blew my cover the other day. I was actually a musician. And my saxophone is actually sitting right here. I played it for Anzac Day dawn service for the first time rather than listening. But my musical journey is, I'm basically done. You know what I mean? Like, I'm well beyond, I guess, to try and sort of analogize, understanding where you're at in your running, because you've really had your peak sort of performance and you're on a different part of the journey. So I kind of know what that feels like in terms of the expectation of particularly if you want to perform again in racing, hey, because you were up there, what that feels like, the expectation on yourself and that, and then to, for the reality of the performance not quite being there. It's quite interesting.
I completely hear that. And as I write again really openly about in the book, was that I've always been a very aspirational creature. I mean, I think it comes from an absolute love of learning, and especially learning about self and how to get more out of thyself without necessarily taking more from thyself. And so as a kid, I had dreams. I had 3 dreams. I wanted to go to the Olympics. I wanted to live at the Australian Institute of Sport, and I wanted to be a doctor, right? So, well, 2 of them didn't happen, the Olympics and the doctor bit. The third one, living at the AIS, I did, but I was actually working there. Kind of a bit of a dog's body, but I got there. So because of that, I think I'd always seen, I think I'd always had this fairly naive approach that the end point would be reaching the pinnacle of my sporting career. So I strived really hard. And when adversity hit, it was that dream of being a world champion, which by then was actually in the sport of orienteering, was like the thing that held me on the straight and narrow through. And it's why through this time I've preached really hard to my community about the importance of the dream, because it really does help you through that time. The danger point for me was that I didn't have a concept of self or dream after that. I thought that this world title was years away still, and I would keep chasing it till I got there. And the reality was, within 6 months, I was standing on the top of a world title, and I'm 19 years old, in a point in my life where everything outside of that was fairly crumbly. And so when you get there and you achieve the dream, but you have no idea what the dream is after that, it's just like it's almost grief sets in afterwards,
Yeah.
and you realize in that moment that success is beautiful, and success, it is like such a reward for all the work that you put in, but it doesn't change who you are as a human being. And it didn't change Hanny in that moment. But I think after that, got really challenging even more so, because now you're a world champion. Now you are seen to be actually able to run. And if you don't have a really strong sense of self at the basis of all of that, then you latch onto the strength that other people give you. So when people started to tap me on the shoulder and be like, gee, chick, you can run, like you could be an athletic star, or you could go and run the marathon, or what's the next orienteering event you're striving for, and have you ever tried the powerlifting thing? And then the sponsors are like, well, we'll sponsor you, but you got to do 100K races. I just ended up on this kind of journey, right? So pressure, I don't think pressure in itself is a problem. I think pressure is only a problem if you haven't done the homework and you don't know who Hanny is at the core of it all. When you take away all of it and just go, who is Hanny and what does she love doing? I think if you have a really strong sense of self of that, then you can stand on any start line and block out that noise, right? Or for you and your music, you can have crowds cheering you on, but you know exactly the way you want to play in that moment. So that's kind of why I guess, like, maybe I've ended up kind of a bit of a different creature in the coaching world, but I just see so many people who just bounce from race to race to race to race to race, because it almost fills that void of like,
What do you do instead? Yeah.
what do I do, or where am I going, or how do people see me? But I think what I really hope to bring to the world is like, let's kind of get the basis right. Who are you? How can we find you? What do you love doing? Don't sign up to a race for fear of missing out, but like, what do you love doing? And I guess like I beat myself up a lot for, going out and performing on Tassie's Wilder Trails, but never kind of bring it to a start line in the last 3 years. But I've come to kind of realize that's just me, and I'm not going to apologize for that. In fact, I'm going to revel in it, because that's where I personally find my best self. So
Yeah.
yeah.
So I love what you're talking about, dreams and to me that's saying dream big and don't let anyone, people will always try and say, no, that you're crazy, or, that's too big and unachievable. But, that the passion and vision of dreams is something that I'm actually starting to touch in on myself. It's beautiful. So, you've spoken about, big wilderness adventures. Are they your dreams at the moment, or?
Yeah. So I started running with this group of guys way, like, a long, long, long time ago, when I was like growing up on their farm. And they called themselves the Scum Runners, which stood for Secret Closet Undercover Milers. So it basically was a scraggly group of middle-aged men meeting at Ferntree on a Saturday morning to run together.
Yeah.
And you know how when you run in a group, right, there's always someone who's just having a great day and they're kind of out the front, and sometimes it can be kind of a bit of an anomaly. Like normally they'd been in like the middle of the packer, maybe a back of the packer, but now they're like sprinting up the zigzag track like they've just taken go juice. And so I started running with these guys, and they'd be like, that person's a scum. Like they've been doing closet miles just to put us all to shame in this Saturday morning run, right? So they brought so much joy to my running. And it was back in the day when you could rock up to the start line of Cradle Ultra and get a start entry, in the moment. And they really encouraged me to come and do this. And I was like, I think I was like 17 or something. I wasn't very old. So I sort of naively signed up to run like Cradle Ultra, which actually turned out to be one of the best days of my life as a runner, just when everything came together. I ate like cherry ripe bars and drank water out of the streams, and then when I got to Narcissus, my Swedish friend was there with Swedish cinnamon scrolls. He just got off a plane from Sweden, and I chewed them all the way down the lake, and I just had this incredible day. And I think kind of from that moment on, I fell in love with this idea of like running wilder in Tassie. But like I say, I got so pushed off course for a long period of time, and to the point where I was just like shunned the whole idea of trail running shoes. And I'm a road runner, and I kind of finally come home, and it wasn't easy. Like when we were in Canberra, I really lost my confidence in wild spaces. It's much easier landscape there to adventure in, and you never feel far from home. And I came back to Tassie, and it just scared the shit out of me.
Pretty gnarly.
I had some pretty wild days, in places like Mount Ann, but I just didn't feel confident, and I didn't feel confident on my own. So I lived in a sheltered bubble of playing very locally and with other people, and I think I've just slowly chipped away at that fear because I didn't want it to rule me. And yeah, then in more recent times, I guess just the dreams got a bit crazier. But I'm not trying to make them crazier. Like I'm not on this trajectory of like, now I've done this, I've got to do that, and then I've done this, I've got to do that. It's like I just go where my heart is singing, and where it's appropriate, and where the curiosity takes me, I think, is the next one.
Awesome. So where is the next one then? Or is it a secret?
I don't know. I mean, Western Arthurs was one that had always grasped my attention because, I mean, the big one that always sat there for me after doing some of the trails in Tassie was definitely South Coast Track. And that one really scared me because, as you know, that once you start, you are in it. There's actually no out. You could turn around and head back to because we went Cockle Creek through to Melaleuca, and I did it with my best mate Dale. But Dale's wife and Graham dropped us at Cockle Creek, so we camped the night. We started at 3 or 4 in the morning. Can't remember what it was, in the dark. And they literally, in that moment, jumped in the car and headed back to Cambridge Airstrip to fly into Melaleuca. So as soon as they left, we were in it. We could probably turn out to Cockle Creek, but it would be even then pretty hard to get a lift back over. And they'd be meanwhile flying into Melaleuca. So there was kind of like a world of pressure to kind of get to Melaleuca. So just in that moment, I remember just saying to Dale as we started out, I'm like, dude, I can't say anything to you. I just have to sever the rope between us and Cockle Creek because, you finally reach a point in a run where that rope snaps and you're like, okay, now all right, I'm committed. But until we got to that moment, I was just like, I can't say anything. I was just so terrified I was going to burst into tears. And then that day was just again, it was just one of those runs when everything comes together. And I think it was a combination of like doing the work over years and years and years and years and years, physically, mentally, and then I think kind of finally mastering the art of just doing what you truly love. And there was nowhere else on the planet I wanted to be, and it just made for the best day out for both of us. So that was cool. That was wild. And then I think when you fly out of Melaleuca, you fly quite close to the Western Arthurs, and it had always been on my radar because of Stu Gibson doing it, and some friends from the Scum running days back then taking 19 hours to kind of troops around it. And so I kind of always wondered what it was about because I'd never even been there. And so, every time we'd like see glimpses of it from some random peak, I'd always like raise it with Graham. And so it was actually him who brought that one to life because he'd heard that the conditions were quite good out there this summer, and he's like, you should go and do it. And I'm like, when are we talking about? This is like, I don't know, Wednesday night. And he's like, well, we've got Friday and Saturday off. And I was just like, Jesus. Yeah. So like getting around that was just, solo was just like an amazing day. It was never about speed. It was just being in that landscape and just enjoying it. And I guess like celebrating where I'd finally got to as an athlete. Now after that, I don't know. I've got a bucket list as long as my arm.
Yeah, same. What date did you do it again?
So I did it in, I think it was late February.
Yeah. Yeah, because I did it in January actually, so
Yeah, right.
that's maybe where
Yeah.
Graham got his got his
So,
intel from.
yeah.
Yeah.
But I say all of this with a word of caution, and I've always had this. Um, I think in Australia we have this whole, we call it tall poppy syndrome, but where or keeping up with the Joneses,
Mm.
and I guess I'd want everyone to experience this. It's why we do the tours. It's why I coach. It's why I don't preach racing necessarily, but I want everyone to be able to spark that dream and chase it unapologetically. But I just want to add the caveat that I've been an athlete since I was 7 years old. I ran the Overland when I was 17 and I'm now 33. I've been doing this homework for a long time, and I just implore people to play safely at the same time, and to know where you are at in that journey and be okay with it taking time. Because since then, I've heard of so many people saying, "Yeah, we're off to run the South Coast track," and I'm not judging people, but I'm now aware, because of my journey and the thousands of people that I've worked with as a coach, is like, just know what's appropriate, and let's keep a really good name and brand around trail running. Because when we came back here 5 years ago to open our Find Your Feet store, there was literally not a pair of trail running shoes in the state, and there certainly wasn't a Vestpac. So this journey is very new for people, and I'm so proud to see how this community has come together and really embrace this idea of trail running. But let's be sensible on this journey as well. And I'm bringing that to myself, and I'm saying that to myself now, because I've done some things that were probably right on the edge for me. And I think it's not necessarily, like I say, about always going further or faster or beating people's times, or entitlement on the trails, but it's entering these landscapes with reverence. Because when you do, there's a real humility in that moment. And I think that's when you really actually connect with the landscapes the most and realize that we are just visitors. We are not the custodians of the landscape, and I've dropped that completely. We are visitors, and our ancestors go a long, long way back, and the landscapes go a long, long way back. And so, yeah, just even in this moment with COVID and the parks reopening, is like, they're not our parks, and they never were. And so we don't enter them with entitlement, enter them with reverence, and you get this very ethereal feeling out there at the moment. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, definitely with humility and respect,
Mm.
and from a safety perspective, for the hazards that it holds. Like the Tassie's gnarly, the weather is
Yeah.
hectic, and that the severing the cord, as you were saying, heading out from Cockle Creek, I call that the umbilical cord, and I mean, yeah, there was a little, I actually commented on it in that little film I did for the Cradle Mountain Film Festival on the Western Arthurs journey, that yeah, on the first part of any journey, because like your history's been as an athlete, and my history coming into those types of runs was as a growing up bushwalking, and then mountaineering and alpine climbing. And so a lot of skills of bush skills and mountain skills coming from there into the trail running. I certainly no way I could jump into those environments without that. That's
Mm.
but even with those skills, and yourself with the athlete skills, it's still we're as you were saying this, sharing that story, I'm like ting ting ting, yes, 100%. But it's yeah, without that healthy respect, it can spank you so big and hard so quickly.
Completely. Completely. And to be honest, we've all been spanked,
Hmm.
and definitely had those very humbling moments. And I think the thing which gave me the confidence, especially something like the Western Arthur Traverse, um, was just spending that 19 days in the French Pyrenees, running solo on trails that I'd never been in, that are really actually very brutal. I totally underestimated it. Those mountains are huge, like real mountains, 4,200 plus meters in some places. And every day you're effectively climbing 2 or 3 times Mount Wellington every single day. Every day started with a climb up Mount Wellington just to get out of the valleys where we were using accommodation because we went so spontaneously, so light. And then with a week to go, my phone drowned with me in a thunderstorm where we were just crossing these I was crossing these open high plains with this massive thunderstorm going on around me, and at that moment I was in it. There was no out once it hit me, so the phone drowned with me in that. And then the thing was that because we'd gone so lightweight, literally we only had what would fit in a vest pack with us. Graham was now driving a car supporting me, and I was running each day, and he'd bump into me or meet me on the trail at certain times, but most of the day, every day, I was on my own. And we had 2 phones, right? So my phone had been my phone, and it had also been where I had all my maps. So I was using maps.me, which most people will be familiar with, to navigate. Once my phone drowned, we had 1 phone left between us. So the decision was, do I take Graham's phone with maps.me, knowing then that he won't be able to navigate in the car to find me, nor if anything happened to me on the trail, I couldn't borrow a phone and call him from someone else's phone or, from a village somewhere and say, come pick me up, I'm lost or tired or whatever, whatever happens. So we made the decision that I would run without the phone, which meant that I then had no map either. So for the last week I spent on the trail, I'd never been in this place before, and I was just doing I'm glad I was an orienteer because I could do a lot of map memory. These trails are so convoluted, and there's a lot of shepherding up in these mountains, so there's animal pads everywhere, and you just really have to kind of trust yourself and back yourself the whole time. And I think just kind of having that experience of just me on a mountain, starting in the dark every morning with a head torch, not knowing where you were heading, and having to kind of fend for yourself and then deal with 19 days of fatigue in your legs, just holding it all together and fueling yourself and making sure you're the right temperature, and just time again, I was thrown in situations where I just had to back myself and trust myself. And I think it was that literally gave me the confidence then to go out into the Western Arthur landscape for me and step up you doing it. Now that I've done it, total kudos, right? It's gnarly.
Yeah.
But for me, my personal journey was I needed that huge period of time of just backing myself and building up a confidence base. Yeah.
19 days. Oh my goodness, that's epic. That is the work. I need a sombrero to take off that adventure. Whoa. So
it was so cool. I want everyone to have an experience like that. I really mean that, and I encourage people to dream crazy, because it was literally 2 days before we had this time off, just decision to finally do it. I'd had the dream for a long time, but I didn't have the confidence to kind of sign up. And I think the thing I just want to kind of say about it, because it is really cool, is that the French Pyrenees Traverse Ride, it goes from the Atlantic to the Mediterranean coastline, and if you draw a straight line, it's about 700 kilometres, but when you add in the trails, I don't know, it's somewhere in the vicinity of 900, with 45,000 plus metres of vertical climbing. I didn't really know any of this, right? I hadn't had time to do that.
45,000.
But it kind of worked out that effectively it was a bit like running a marathon every day straight for 3 weeks, because we only had 3 weeks. We had a flight home. So when I started, I saw it as a physical challenge, right? And I approached it like a physical challenge. It was like, well, the quicker I get this marathon distance done, the quicker I can be recovering, the quicker I can get on the trails again tomorrow. And yeah, well, that beat me up in a few days, right? So then it became these real mental challenges, right, well, if it's not a physical challenge, it's a mental challenge, and I'm going to grit my teeth, and I'm just going to almost think my way through it is the approach I was taking. So how fast do I need to be going, and how many gels would I need to eat, and it was very intellectual. And then that definitely broke me. Because as soon as the trail threw anything that wasn't expected at me, I was like, I didn't have the tools to deal with it. So then it became incredibly emotional, as Graham would testify, because the biggest emotion I had wasn't necessarily fear, it was guilt. It was the first 3-week holiday that we'd had since we got married. We didn't even have a honeymoon, right? Our honeymoon was taking 12 junior-aged athletes to Finland to race at the Junior World Championships. So I saw this as like just guilt of taking this time to do something like this when we could have been, I don't know, like lounging in recliner lounges by some swimming pool, eating strawberries and being romantic. And here I was just like,
and getting bored, maybe. Yeah, well, that's love and commitment right there. But I can see that that'd be like the that selfishness from that you thought would be gone once you're finished being an athlete, coming back to haunt you on that.
It was worse because now he was driving a car like the length of the French Pyrenees while I was running in the mountains. It was like, so that was then really emotional because it was guilt, it was fear, it was terror at times, it was total joy and elation in moments, but it was just an emotional roller coaster. And then with about 1 week to go, that all just died out and my body had adjusted. My mindset was completely different. I had very, very, very clear thinking, and I probably had to in that moment as well because I was doing so much map memory, and I also was just so calm. Like, again, the word that comes to mind is an ethereal space. You just, it's almost like you just enter this bubble, right? And even when I finally reached the ocean at the Mediterranean, I'd been anticipating this moment for so much of the traverse, and I kind of imagined myself like bursting into tears or like high-fiving Graham or diving into the ocean. And I literally just got there and sat down on this, I thought it was going to be a sandy beach and it was actually like really rocky. And I sat down on these rocks on the beach and I just was like, right. Like there was no emotion. I couldn't think. My body felt numb. And even when I dived into this freezing cold water, because I'd expected it to be like tropical, it was just this like real numbness. And it's kind of like, I can see why people get addicted to that kind of thing because it's very few times where you get that real sense of total calmness. And I know the only other times I've had it is after a really huge race when you've given it absolutely everything and you come out the other side and you lay everything on the line. And I think that's one reason why people keep going back to races is for that moment of tranquility that you get afterwards, and that in-between moment of like accomplishing something and the what next. It's just this in the middle bit. So it's cool.
I actually got a couple of hours of that on the mile an hour marathon in that period, like after 1 a.m. or something. That was phenomenal. I was really quite surprised by that. But I love the journey in the Pyrenees of like, right, we'll take a physical approach, smashed, got burnt. All right, what's next? We'll take the mental approach, a methodical mental and as soon as something throws a spanner in that, oof, and then it fully makes sense. You just then into raw emotional, and with that, that feedback there. At that point, why'd you keep going? Like what brought you through to the other side? And did the having to navigate from memory, did that provide some focus that sort of helped? Do you think?
Yeah, completely. That's such a cool question. No one's asked me that. That's awesome. You know what? I think it was the homework I'd done. At this time, I'd been working with Alice, my mentor, now for probably a solid 8-9 months, and really come to understand myself on a very different level, and started to get this very deep calling that I wasn't willing anymore to live by the rule books, and that my calling in life was wilder. The word keeps coming out of my mouth, but it is who I am. And so I'd come to realize, right, that we are like an onion, and we have this kind of very intellectual, mental side that sort of, well, in fact, we have our physical being that we kind of do everything with, and then we have this conscious brain that tries to control us. That's the mental bit. And then there's sort of this big bundle of very complex, confusing emotions. And there's a kid that wasn't given any language to language emotions with. That was like super confusing. But I'd come to finally feel that there was this other part of Hanny that sat below that was very calm and that had this calling to do things outside of the rule books, and that was wilder, and that absolutely loved to run, and especially alone on a wilder trail. And so even when all that emotion was boiling on around me, I just knew I was meant to keep going. And I have no idea still why or to what purpose the Pyrenees will serve me, right? But I do know that there's something that's to be done with it. And whether or not it is another book, because I came home and I'd finished the draft of Finding My Feet by that point, but I wasn't sure, and I'm not going to give it away because everyone can read the ending, whether all I'll say is that at the ending I ask a question, right? And I didn't know, and I still maybe, no, I do. But in that moment I didn't know the answer to the question, right? Or whether it was the right question. And when I was in the Pyrenees, I had this very clear deja vu moment of like, I know the answer.
Mm-hmm.
And so I came home and I was like, I've got to rewrite the ending of this book. Like, I know the answer to the question. And so I sat down and I just started writing. And the book is already quite long. And it kept blowing out. I couldn't write this ending succinctly. And then I had another awakening moment where I was like, this isn't the ending of that book. It's the starting of a new one. It's a new chapter.
And I was going to ask that, if there was another book coming through, noting that, you'd finished writing Finding Your Feet, in October. That's a long time.
Well, the publishers are pushing my buttons at the moment to get it out by next year. I don't know how that's going to work. But anyway, another journey to be had. So it's great.
Well, I mean, talking of journeys to be had, we're all looking forward to travel opening up again. And, I want to plug your because I want to come on one day when I've actually got time and we can travel in that. Like, what a way to go and see a wild place internationally. And I know just how good it would be, and I know a few people have gone on them. So Ooh.
And I feel so blessed to have lived a life filled with these amazing experiences and living in cultures that I would never have lived in. If it hadn't been for orienteering, and again I write about a lot of them in the book, and I couldn't even get them all in there because I've just been so blessed. But all I want to say is that I think even before COVID hit, I'd reached a point where I, again, had another moment of real realization that we need to begin to do things differently. And I always felt like the international trips were a real luxury. And I felt almost guilty because taking people to the other side of the world in a planet that's already at struggle street in a climate sense didn't really sit well with my values. But in the same sense, I kept coming back to the fact that people were just having these massive moments of reckoning for themselves on these trips when they were finally able to go and do what they truly loved doing and be around people who truly accepted them and got them. And, you challenged them in environments where they were outside of their comfort zones, and you just see these, amazing transitions in people. And I do them for that reason more than about the holiday and the journeys, but the journey that the person can go on as well. And so I think the realization I was finally getting to recently was that if we're going to travel, we need to do it in a regenerative way. It's the same if we travel within our state as well, is that we don't go to take or to necessarily even experience, but we go to give back in some way. So whether you do it in your way as like supporting local, or for you, you're now talking about, helping to keep tracks alive and safe, and or whether it's like embracing the return to country for our elders past, present and future. However you do it, I think we need to think about the way we live on this planet as a regenerative way, that we're giving back as much as we can and trusting that we're meant to do that. And so, yeah, the tours, I'm excited for the evolution. I haven't yet had time to creatively think about them in the sort of house burning down around us with COVID, but I'm looking forward to that time as well to see where that journey goes next.
Yeah, cool. You mentioned before that trail running as a sort of a recognised sport and community in Tassie is only really sort of emerging over the last 5-10 years, whatever it might be. But of course, we've got to recognise that people have been running on the trails and on the mountains for well over a century. There's a nice, neat little story, or Radford's and that other guy, I can't remember. But and places like Europe seem to have much more buoyant, I guess, or present trail running communities more in the mainstream. I mean, Chamonix, for example, you go there in summer, everyone's walking down the street with a vest pack on. What, from what you've seen over there, I don't know if you've spent time sort of immersing in their communities, but really interested to know, well, what do you see that has worked really well for them in the community building and sort of immersion in country over there that we can perhaps learn from for our community here?
Yeah, it's another amazing question. I'm loving this. Thank you. The biggest difference, the biggest change is that for them it's a way of life, right? They build wellness and movement and community and relationships and appreciation into their whole being, their whole existence, right? It's such a different conversation to so many that I have with so many people, even in my coaching environment, is like you bring a concept to someone that will require a slight shift in their routines, and you can feel their walls go up and they're like, I just don't know how I'll fit that in. Whereas in the European model and even the Japanese model, which is another place where it's done in an extraordinary way, is it's seen about wellness and fluidity, and the weekend is about just being out in the mountains, moving and being together, and it's not about doing the run and eating breakfast and going to work. It's kind of like this blend of this is just how we live, right? And so in that, then their generosity is so huge because they don't feel like they're losing out of their routine or it's impeding on their lifestyle, because their lifestyle is just fluid and moving. And so I guess I want to bring, and that's what Find Your Feet, the retail side, has been about, is about bringing the tools and the flavours of Europe into our Australian model, which has always been sort of either sporting or hiking and never had that kind of junction in the middle. So, yeah, if you want to, I think it's really cool if you can ever experience that and immerse yourself in the landscape and a culture and really get a feel for that. It's an amazing way to travel. But, yeah, I think the way to do it is to just, again, like I say, sit down and look at all the assumptions that you have going on in your world and all the routines that you've got going on in your world, and ask yourself what serves you and what doesn't. And how can you bring family and community into that? So how can you include your kids in your runs, and how can you teach your kids to love the trails, and how can you give back to your community at the same time as getting something from it? Or don't even have to get something from it, just give back and know that eventually it comes back to meet you. Yeah.
Yeah, 100%. And one thing I'll take out of that is that or the key thing is the infusion of the running experience with life. It's not I've got to, and I think that's something that hopefully is a good takeaway for those of our community listening now that have families and do struggle with balancing family work and running. Where hey, let's figure out ways of sort of infusing running with the family and perhaps even with work. Well, hey, commuting. I mean, Kylie does an amazing job of that,
Mm,
and yourself, and immersing in that in country, and
yeah.
also something I've sort of observed a little bit as comparing European events to Australian events is perhaps the Australian events are. I mean, it's a terrible word, but perhaps a little more insular in terms of the trail running. It's serious. Particularly at longer races, everyone's serious and then and focused, and it's sort of the event is its little bubble. Whereas, like at UTMB and other crazy big races, the entire community is out there, just like Tour de France, on the side of the road, cheering everyone on, in dark o'clock and all that sort of thing.
Yeah, completely. It is absolutely that. And they celebrate it, and they celebrate not just the winners, but they celebrate everyone. They celebrate the aid stations, like far out of any like get and cheese and wine flowing, and they don't care as long as everyone's having a great old jolly time. So yeah, and when I was orienteering, we had clubhouses, and every night it was someone different's turn to cook dinner for everyone, and you'd shower together and sauna together, and it's just a totally different feel. And I kind of hope one day Australia does catch on to that.
Yeah.
And I think the more people that we let into our world and we help into this world and give them that experience, even if it's just running to Silver Falls and back from Ferntree, that in itself is wild for someone, and it will give them a taste of that. But all I ask people to do is that where possible, drop the training and also take time on this journey. Don't rush it. Take time to do the recuperation and the recovery and the wellness and the eating well and sleeping well and including your kids and not worrying that you're missing out on a training session in that one moment, because the more you do that, the more you set yourself up for this way of life that can hopefully serve us all till we're greyer and older than we are now. So,
Absolutely. Oh wow. This conversation has far exceeded my expectations.
sorry, I
I,
love to ramble. I love stories.
It's been beautiful. I'm like, I'm getting super excited, and there's a bunch of things like really aligning here actually. But we do have a couple of questions from our community that I'd love to put to you. What would be your favourite trail to run in Tasmania?
Hmm.
That's a very good question. Very
Ask
hard
the next,
question.
ask the next one, and we'll come back to it. I need to
um,
think of.
yeah, in the absence of events, are you in base training and still enjoying playing wilder? I guess with the parks opening, how did the parks opening affect you this week?
Oh yeah, I played pretty hard on Monday. Got completely carried away.
Yep.
It didn't faze me them closing. I mean, in the very first moment, there was a bit of shock, but anywhere you run is a window into a landscape. Even running along roads, I would notice scorpions crossing. I mean, have you ever been on a road in any other way and seen scorpions crossing the road, right? So anytime you run, anywhere you run is an opportunity to just be and experience stuff. So, but when the mountain reopens, like, I knew I needed to be up there, but not to necessarily go to the summit or go further or do, I just had this feeling like I just needed to be there, and I would just go for however long I felt. So Monday was totally joyful. Tuesday, I was tired. I haven't run like that for ages, so that was cool. It was such a great feeling. Yeah. So, but in terms of like without a goal, I mean, yeah, I'm base training. I run tempo runs when I feel like I need to blow out the cobwebs. I focus more on hills because it's like doing strength and running all at once. And doing a heap of yoga daily, mainly yin yoga, so deep stretch, deep meditation, I always have now got a principle in my life. If I add a stressor to my world, then I must counterbalance it with something that unwinds me, whether it's reading a book or stretching or yoga or, walking or just sitting. I finish every run now sitting on a bench or a log, just having like 30-second, 1 minute quiet moment where you just be present, and it earths me, and I feel like I'm almost becoming a different being through this. So I really encourage people, you don't necessarily have to have a goal, but you can still play really hard.
Yeah.
That's cool. I'm really excited. Okay, back to the other question. Oh, geez.
Well, we've got another one that we can just put in there as well. Yeah. So, talking about taking time out and perhaps smelling the flowers. You are quite a competitive person, Hanny. I'm sure you'd agree.
They don't play board games with me.
But do you have like a go-to sport or activity that you're not so good at, or even like really crap at, just to practice being less competitive?
Oh yeah. Oh, dude. Like, is there a sport I do well other than running and swimming? Like, I actually am not joking. In year 8, my PE teacher wanted to fail me in physical education because she said I didn't try hard enough.
Oh.
I am the biggest klutz, right, at anything that requires balls, bats, hitting, catching, kicking. So that's pretty much every single sport. Add to that, I have a total phobia of dancing. So please don't ask me to ever dance because I'll two-step in the corner and then still look sheepish. So, I mean, trying new sports is actually like quite scary for me. That's why I'm probably extra proud of the fact that I've got a yoga mat on the floor behind me. It's like, because, there's a lot of coordination required for even that. So, no, I'm really not great at sport at all.
Yeah. Awesome. So how is your dance floor game at the moment?
Oh, it's terrible. It's actually horrendous. But one day I told Graham that we are going to learn to dance because I don't like having something. I'm not a competitive person. I'm just a driven person. I think there's a difference. I always want to find the edge of success for me is a willingness to walk on the edge, and failure is a willingness not to go to the edge. So for me, I do need to learn to dance at some point, but I might wait till I'm much grayer and much older, and my ego is even more humble than it is now, I hope.
Yeah. There's a time for everything. It's like paragliding. I'll do that one day.
That's right. Life is far too busy for that at the moment.
Yeah. All right. So back to the good question. Can you put a finger on a favourite trail in Tassie? I'm struggling, that's for sure.
No, I am actually struggling.
Yeah.
I think any opportunity to be on a trail is like a total gift, right? Because it's not there for everyone. I feel like any moment I get to go out the door and be in a landscape and just observing it and feeling it is just unreal. But if I did have to have a favourite, for me, the Cradle Mountain is just a place which is just so special because of the ancientness of that landscape. And those trees, like the pencil pines and the king billies, I just am totally in love with them. I could just sit under a tree for hours up there. So, yeah, I think for me it would definitely be Cradle area. There's this one really cool track behind the lodge which goes down this like almost sphagnum style mossy ferny ground. It's so spongy, and if you run really, really, really fast down there, totally out of control like a kid would down the hill, it's like you can't help but whoop with joy because even if you fell over, it's just like falling on a mattress. So I totally recommend that. It's really
Yeah.
cracker.
I think whooping with joy whilst running is what it's absolutely all about for all of us, surely, no matter where you're running. And that's let's just leave it on that beautiful note. I mean, it's
Happy with that.
been an absolute pleasure, Hanny. Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for having me.
I'm like just blown away by how that conversation evolved, and I'm sure Madge would be proud us practicing the art of conversation. Um,
Yeah,
really looking forward to things getting back where we can all run together, and we can your
agreed.
tours can start again, and where we all come together and our community strengthens. We're supporting each other, and you're a huge part of that, Hanny. And thank you so
Hey,
much. Uh,
I look forward to getting on the trails because, like I say, my valleys have been very shaken up in through COVID and I've slowed down a lot. And I
mm,
just can't wait to run with friends and community on our local doorstep. I just bring it on. So, yeah, total gratitude, Lincoln, for everything you're doing for our community. I hope everyone actually sees how hard it is to sit in your shoes at the moment and steps up to kind of walk alongside you and in front of you and lead this because it's why we started Hobart Trail Runners. It had a bit of a shaky start, but you're bringing energy to it. But I don't want you to be the one always bringing